Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. We believe that every child deserves a Montessori education. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
I'm David Hargis, and whether you're live with us, hello out there, or you're watching the replay, or maybe you're listening to this as a podcast, we're very happy to have you with us. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can find us online at childoftheredwoods.com.
Okay, so today we are learning about bones. We actually are going to learn about a little bit about bones ourselves, think about how cool they are, and we are going to talk about how to use them with your child. This is actually one of our 21 Montessori essentials, bones. And I know it's a little bit of a broad a broad subject, right? It's not a classic Montessori material, but I think that you'll find it really interesting, just like we have and we've used it in our own house. So you can actually head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com/essentials, to read more about why it's included and to see the rest of the list of Montessori essentials.
Yeah, this is one of those that I like because it is kind of broader and it could be no cost depending on
That's right.
your scavenging skills, I suppose.
That's right.
But it's so amazing, right? And they're just an educational staple. You'll find the study of bones or human anatomy and the skeletal system in basically any educational system or any educational approach at some point. And in our approach, we will study bones really in two areas. We did a survey of the Montessori lessons for ages 2 through 9, and we found these 10 curricular areas. And we think bones are really studied most heavily in two of them. One is life science, which includes zoology, and the other is humankind, which includes human anatomy. And like I said, there are 10 in total. And as you'll learn in a little bit, you'll actually use bones in other disciplines as well, or other subject areas as well. But this is kind of where we generally would think about them. So for our purposes, we're not making a distinction between a human and a non-human bone. We're just talking about anything bone related. So it could be names of bones or studying a bone that you might find in the forest. Here's one. We have quite a collection here. We'll share in a minute here of bone discoveries, bone chilling discoveries. So studying a bone that you might find in the woods. It could be going to the museum and studying a fossilized bone or an x-ray of a bone that you have bought, or even that you might look at in a doctor's office. The only difference is the purpose and the readiness of the child, the purpose of the lesson and the readiness of the child, which is why this is an essential, because it has applicability for so many age groups, from very, very little all the way up.
That's right.
So what's interesting for me is that Maria is a product of the late 19th century. She was born in I think in the 1870s. And was a doctor and a scientist, definitely a really, wonderful scientist, but a scientist of her age. It was the age of naturalism, where there was a lot of emphasis on ordering and classifying plants and animals and other things, right? And really kind of focusing on making the distinction. You'll see that in a lot of the Montessori lessons today, especially in the lower elementary curriculum and beyond, where there becomes a greater and greater focus on classification and getting into minutia and taxonomy. And part of that is a reflection of her work as a scientist and her time that she came from. Now, of course, today, I think we would probably it's not that we don't have a naturalist legacy, but I think the emphasis tends to be more about the interconnectivity of things, how we are not so much what makes us distinct, but what makes us similar, both in terms of our anatomy, like what kind of bone structure might we share, but also in terms of how all of the organisms on the earth live together, ecology, which wasn't really a concept, as far as I know, that really existed in her age. So what gives there? Is one better than the other? Is her traditional approach to naturalism superior, or should we go with it and dive right into like the big picture stuff always?
Well, if you think about the way life science is generally taught to preschoolers, and then young elementary students, we don't actually spend a whole lot of time classifying in a traditional sense.
Hmm.
Usually it's kind of just about naming the animals that are out there or the plants, and
Hmm.
more emphasis on animals than on plants, really.
Hmm.
And not really, maybe you might study like the circle of life, predator versus prey, those
Yeah.
sorts of concepts. And certainly environmentalism is definitely part of a traditional curriculum as well, because it's
Today.
relevant
Yeah.
today. But in my experience, the kind of classification that we do in Montessori is still really, really
Yeah.
unique. So it's not like Maria created this. She definitely didn't create the idea of classifying, animals
Hmm.
and plants, but she really was one of the first to put it into a classroom setting, as a set of lessons really that we give young children, and to put it
And
in
for
the
this age group,
hands
right?
of young
Yeah.
children. Yeah. And even today in classrooms, like, that is one part of Montessori that didn't really take off everywhere, that I
Yeah.
really wish had. It's something that parents find super unique and amazing when they actually see the kind of work that children do in a Montessori
Yeah. Because I
school.
remember studying like the order of animals and classification of animals in junior high,
Mhm.
but in Montessori
Or
and
maybe in high school biology even.
yeah, but definitely not before. I was a early preteen or just on that edge. But for
Right.
us, you would teach a 5 or 6 year old, or even younger. You would start getting into some basic classification very early, and by the lower elementary years, first, second, third, they're really getting deep into taxonomy, classification,
Yes.
the orders of animals
Yeah.
and plant life, and so forth.
We have done a lot of work in our constellation program about with emphasizing the classification. I
Yep.
remember we did some emphasis on recently on Nidaria.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
With which includes like
Yep.
jellyfish and other kind of invertebrates,
Yeah, we had
right?
a theme on jellyfish.
Mhm. And upcoming, we're about to do a study kind of on the theme of whales. And so we'll be
Yep.
studying cetaceans. And so not only will children be learning, like, oh, okay, a whale is a cetacean, classified as a cetacean, but like, what are the categories that go under cetaceans?
That's right.
What kind of cetaceans are there? Well, there's dolphins, there's porpoises, there's whales, but how are they different?
That's right.
And how are they similar, and why would we place them into these different
And where do they
categories?
come from anyway?
Where do they come from anyway?
Yeah.
So this is really, really unique in the Montessori approach as far as sharing this information to children. And Maria Montessori herself, this was an epiphany for her, that young children could learn these immense vocabulary words with seemingly, she would say, like, seemingly with very little effort. They would just kind of pick them up, just like they pick up the word, mug or microphone. They would learn the words for cetaceans. So she noticed that to them, they're just in this incredible receptive period for acquiring vocabulary words, and it just doesn't matter how long or complicated or how many vocabulary words there are. Young children are capable of learning them, and this is like a prime time for studying
Yeah, and that's really a
classification.
kind of a false choice to say, should you focus on like the older sort of classification versus the more interconnected, because that's not actually how it works at all. A child really in those early years up to maybe age 12 or so, they're just a voracious learner. Like you said, they'll learn a scientific term as easily as a everyday term because it's just language to them and they don't have the same kind of weighted meaning. And you're building all those little, they're like building blocks and you're filling them up with the building blocks. And what's going to come in that third plane around 12 or after, they're going to start to sort that. They're going to figure out, like, you've given them a whole bunch of Legos and now they're going to decide what they want to build. Some of those things are going to toss and some of them they're going to keep, and they're going to grow and grow and grow. And that's where the interconnectivities, like the bigger picture interconnectivities, will really start to come to life as they continue on. And if you've given them a big vocabulary, a big understanding of the world in those early years, you've really equipped them to go off and make all kinds of amazing discoveries.
Mhm.
So why do we study bones? We study bones in part because they really are a window into a lot of these different topics. Kids are super fascinated by them, and they just lend themselves so well to this progression. Of course, I think probably the most classic of the Montessori lessons when it comes to bones is the little miniature skeleton, the Mr. Thrifty.
Yeah, I know you're making this.
Now he's not
You're
this
making
tiny.
it
That's right.
this size, but he's actually the one that we recommend that
Yeah,
the
he's about 2
parents in
feet.
our programs get is about 2 or 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not this tiny. They're
They do make
about
them that tiny.
They do. But they're too
They
hard
do,
to.
but they're harder to use. I mean, they're cheaper at that size, but less detailed, and we really like the ones that are able to be
You want to get a big
manipulated.
enough where you can see the different bones really
Mhm.
clearly, or they can come apart in some cases. And it's
Articulated.
exactly. So really what you want is a small articulated skeleton. You'll find these in a lot of Montessori classrooms, in fact,
Mhm.
and sometimes very large ones. They'll have even full-size ones in certain classrooms. But the traditional one is the 2 to 3 foot one. That's the one I tend to see.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we live in an age where you can kind of get those more easily
You can,
at
yeah.
home. There wasn't always the case. We
You know,
had one.
Schools used to order from like science and lab supply
Yes.
warehouses, and those were kind of, I don't know, they were like in the old days, they just came to your school in a catalog,
Yeah.
and you might just order these things. But these days, you can just order all kinds of this cool academic stuff on the internet. So you can actually order, if your child became super interested in, for example, just like teeth, you could
Mhm.
order a full scale model of like a dentist, what a dentist would have in their office for display. Or you can order, say your child, I don't know, say your child has breaks their arm or something, you actually could order like a part of the skeleton that would show that, and it's something that's really, really cool. So we now have access, and of course you do have to pay for these things, but they're really amazing.
They are, and I would very much like to show ours. We called him Mr. Bones, a very clever name for a miniature skeleton.
We let our children name him.
Unfortunately,
and
Mr.
it was
Bones,
it was a male skeleton, so
he was a Mr. Bones,
yes.
but unfortunately, Mr. Bones is no longer with us, or
No.
he was damaged in the closet accident.
He actually wasn't.
Are you sure? Because that's what I remember.
Yeah, I know. I think he was just played to death. Boom, boom, No, he really was played to death. Yeah. Our children played with him constantly. And by the time he got into the closet, he was already really janky. And I think he just got jumbled in there in the end. We just kind of gave up. He just became a plaything in the end, which, and he was priced adequately, as well. So it wasn't a huge loss. We'll need to buy another.
He certainly was
sometime.
loved.
But I do miss him. So it's on my list to buy another one.
Yeah, we had for those of you who are joining us in our Constellation, you might remember this, or if you've recently joined Constellation, you can find this in the library.
So you can also find it in our shop just for sale.
Oh yeah, that's right. You can just purchase this outright, and it's a theme all on bones. And one of the things I remember in our community, people who had their own little Mr. Thrifties, the pictures of the kids dressing them or playing with them were just so delightful. It's always so fun to see them. So you're right. I remember seeing him in the closet, at the top of the closet, but perhaps this was post play disaster.
100%.
Anyway, so in addition to a Mr. Thrifty, not a little skeleton, it's smaller but articulated skeleton. There's all kinds of other activities you can use to teach bones, like 3-part cards. Aubrey's going to find some examples here. Some 3-part cards where you're looking for the names of the. Yep. Yeah, here's a picture, and so you can see in red. This is kind of the classic way. So there are 26 different bones in this particular activity. There's lots of different ways to do it, though.
Yeah, we made these half-size pages because we wanted to make sure that you could see all of the bones. So they're a bit larger for our normal 3-part cards. But
there's also a full-size skeleton in there. So activities related to like finding and naming the different parts of the skeleton. And those are especially fun when your little one can feel the bone itself, right? So patella, and then put their hand on the patella, the kneecap, right? So that kind of stuff is really, really neat. The little skeleton models, but also things like finding real bones in nature. So we have a variety here that we've collected over the years. I can't tell you what all of these things are besides bone. The one that we are most proud of is this one.
Well,
Don't you
one
think?
of the ones. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's the coolest. It's a whalebone. We found it on the beach because we happen to live here by the ocean, and marine mammals wash up, and sometimes they leave pieces. And we found this piece of a whale skeleton, and it's just a neat part to have in our collection. And these are the kinds of things that you could start to do where you can, using a real object, start to examine how different kinds of creatures that have bones, how those bones look in real
Mhm.
life. And it just took a little time and patience to collect these over the course of years.
Yes. Yes. And here's another one we talked about. I know you brought up um, antlers versus horns.
Yes, we were talking about antlers and horns earlier.
Dave and I were having this conversation while we were getting ready for this live. We were talking about David brought up, you could even classify things that are made of bone versus things that are not made out of
that
bone.
seem like
right?
they would be made of bone, but aren't.
And so one of those things, I know we mentioned like teeth.
Teeth are not bones.
You'd think your teeth would be bones, right? But they
That's
are
right.
not bones.
Yeah. So here's
right?
a piece of a jaw that one of our kids found. We think it's a wolf
Yeah.
or a coyote.
Fingernails are not bones. Hair obviously is not bones, but these are things that your child, you can even like wiggle your nose and talk about the cartilage in your ears and your noses, and kind of talk about it that way. Our son actually was wandering in the woods one day and found this antler.
Yeah.
And we
It's
were
really beautiful.
Yeah, when we were on the East Coast, and we just thought it was so beautiful. And he was so excited to bring it home.
He was very proud of this.
So we have carried it from house to house with us. And eventually we have plans to just return it back to the forest someday.
At some point. Or he'll take it and display it in his own future
Maybe
home. Who knows?
He can have it. We'll give it to him when he's in college. Maybe when he's exited college and it's making a new life for himself.
But it was a really fun discovery. And it is bone because it is an antler. A horn is not bone. And that's the kind of thing, that's an example of a lesson that you can do with a little one, or even not such a little one. We were talking about this, like what makes a horn and an antler different and similar. And it's just very, very interesting. Yeah. So there are all kinds of ways that you can approach the study of bones. Real bones, parts cards like we showed you, games. We did a shake your tarsus and metatarsus kind of a name game to help kids learn the names of games, drawing, coloring pictures or whatever. One thing I was wondering about is that sometimes kids can get scared of things, and we often have pictures of bones, spooky, scary skeletons can be, or classic Halloween. Do you find that a lot of kids are scared of bones? Do you ever come across parents who say, my little one just isn't ready for the bone lessons?
Yeah, sometimes. Usually, I think that being scared of bones, it would be kind of something that might be taught. So it could be that all of the decorations during Halloween could be kind of instilling some fear because there's other kind of scary, it's a spooky season. And usually the antidote to that would be to introduce real bones, to the child and really ground them in reality. That's kind of the Montessori approach for everything that we do. So what would we do with a child like that? Instead of trying to say, oh, skeletons aren't scary, we would instead give them a simple activity to do with the bone, or present a bone to them in a very natural setting, maybe at a nature center where there's a bunch of stuff to feel on display. One of our favorite activities in Montessori is to do a little bone cleaning or a little bone scrubbing. So I actually became quite interested in this after our son started picking up all of these bones from the forest and, wanting to learn, like, are they sanitary? How do you go about cleaning them? Because he would be super excited and he would pick up a bone and I'd be like, yes, we can take that one home. It looks like it's just dirty from the dirt, or no, that one still has flesh in it. Like, put it down and let's sanitize your hands. Right. And so it took a little while for him to learn the difference between like what was acceptable to bring home and
because sun is a natural disinfectant.
The sun. Yeah. Well, yes.
But it takes time.
So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So
Which bones are
okay,
safe to
so
pick up and which aren't?
yes. Okay. So anyway, he would go around, he would pick up these bones, he would bring them home, and most of them would come home looking kind of like this. I don't know if you can see how like extra dirty this is. So they're not super worried about because there seems to be no flesh clinging to it. It just seems to be full of dirt. But I started wondering like how do you make bones that are just super, super white and pretty, like the kind of bones that you might see at a nature center
Yeah.
or on display at your local museum? You can clean them at home to make them just as cool and just as pretty. And it takes a little bit of fussing with them and maybe some delicate work. So usually when we do bone scrubbing with kids, we'll choose a big bone that has already mostly been disinfected, you know. So the way to do that is first you get your dirty bone. I'll pick a dirty one. Our son picked this one up recently. You get a dirty bone and you're just going to clean it with soap and water first. Just warm water, and don't need to put boiling water or anything because that can kind of weaken the bone. So just use some warm water and a little bit of dish soap, and you're just going to kind of use an old toothbrush or a little scrubbing brush that no one will be brushing their teeth with accidentally. And you're just going to scrub off all the dirt. And once the dirt is off, and it's a pretty good looking bone, nothing clinging to it, nothing
Yeah, you would have wanted to make sure
wet,
that there's
right?
nothing wet or
This one has been dried in the
organic.
wood for so long that a little bit of algae or moss started growing on it. And you're just like kind of scrubbing that off just to make sure that you get off any bacteria and dirt.
Yeah.
And then what you're going to do, you've got a couple options. So as David mentioned earlier, you can take your cleaned bone and put it in the sunlight. And you could just put it out there for a few weeks. And when you're done, like it is going to be so much whiter than it was when you first put it out there.
Yeah.
Now this one is still, I don't know if a person at a museum would like this one or not. It's still, you can still see it's got a little bit of brown on the edges, but from the most part, it's pretty clean and white. The way you get it whiter, you leave it in the sun for a while, and sometimes that can bleach your bones really well. You can also put it in a mix of hydrogen peroxide and water, and we've used that method with cleaning bones as well. Sometimes it cleans it better than others. You can leave it, you kind of mix it like 50-50 mostly. You can put a little more hydrogen peroxide for bigger bones, but not with smaller bones because that might weaken the bone itself. And then you just wait, and you can just wait a few days or you could wait a few weeks. You can refresh it with a little more hydrogen peroxide plus water, if it's you want it to go a little stronger or longer. And then eventually, when you take it out, it will most likely be a lot wider.
And these, we were talking about bones that we found in nature on the beach or whatever, but if you eat meat in the house, you're going to find bones too.
You also can save those bones. Yeah. And some of those bones can look pretty yucky at first. You have some options. So you can take your bones that still have a little meat on them. And what you want to do is so you can clean them with a brush, get as much off as possible. You could also stick them inside. You could like bury them in the dirt. So you can do this. I've heard that you could stick it in some pantyhose and like put it in some water and just leave it in a jar that's like loosely uncovered, and the bacteria will do its work just in the water. So that's kind of cool. And I read that you really want pantyhose to stick it in, or a sock or something, because it's easier to retrieve the bones because the water is going to get pretty gross and smelly. And it'll be outside. So, it'll just put it out in the sun, let the bacteria do its work in the water. It'll be yucky when you're done, but then your bones will be cleaner, right? Because the bacteria will clean them. Or you could stick it in dirt. So you could just get a bucket, fill it with dirt, put your dirty bones inside that still have flesh on them, and then bury it in your backyard, or just stick it out in the backyard in your sun. And essentially, you're basically kind of like composting
it. Yeah, right.
Right. So during the process, again, the bacteria will eat the flesh off of the bones, and they'll be much cleaner, and you'll probably get them out. They'll be dirty. They'll look, kind of yucky like this. And then you'll want to do the bleaching process where you put them out in the sun, you dry them, put them out in the sun for several weeks,
Yep.
or in a solution of hydrogen peroxide and water.
Mm-hmm.
And that will kind of clean your bones too. But it's actually a really fun activity to do with kids.
Yeah.
If we're talking about helping children to not feel so scared about things that have died, or about skeletons, getting really hands-on with your bones and taking care to like feel them and
Mm-hmm.
clean them and understand, that they are cute things to be curious about, just like a rock. Or
Yeah, and we have them in us.
Yeah.
We can't see
and then,
them, but
if you have a little collection, you can talk about the way that the bones are formed, and you can show them
Yeah, exactly.
pictures of, what it looks like inside their body. I think that this one, our son said, probably came from a coyote,
Mm-hmm.
because they were out in an area where there were a lot of coyotes,
Mm-hmm.
and they found other bones that looked like that probably belonged to a coyote. The other day he brought home like a little mouse skull. One of our members in our community found during this bone study, when we were doing bones in constellation, she found, I think, a dead squirrel in their yard. And I was wondering, like, do I have what it actually takes to actually like figure out how to extract the bones and clean this thing? And the answer is, yeah, you could. It's going to be kind of gross and messy. And you'd have to be super brave to like go forth. And you have to understand, like, you're going to want to really wear gloves and set the thing, wherever you're decomposing this material, you're going to bury it far out, away from any place you would want to be.
Yes,
and just leave it there. I think that if you're burying something like a dead squirrel, you're going to leave it there for several months rather than a few weeks. If the bones are fairly cleaned off already, then maybe just a few weeks, but
or years. I know that
it could also be years. Yeah.
Here in San Francisco, we have California Academy of Science, and they'll go and collect occasionally bones from the beach, whale bones and so forth, and then they'll put them on their roof, which is a garden, and for years, and they'll just let them bleach and prepare, and then eventually they'll use them in displays.
Just the other day, one of our kids and I were walking on our beach, and we saw what used to be a dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
It was a dolphin, and it had no head. It had obviously been removed, by someone, some research. Yeah, they did a necropsy, and I thought, wow, that skull is going to be on display somewhere in a few years. After they bury
they'll clean it, they'll bury it. Yeah.
Oh, and did you know that taxidermists and museum curators actually use a kind of beetle to clean bones with?
Really?
That was something I learned when I was researching this. You can actually order them online.
They go around and eat the organic
if you
matter?
actually want that dead squirrel to like very quickly be decomposed and done away with, then you can actually order some of these beetles. They're called like derma beetles or something like that.
Now this may feel macabre, because what I asked is, what if your little one is afraid of bones? And you're saying, actually, what you should be afraid of is that they're going to go grab that bone and put it in their mouth
That's right.
before you have a chance to clean. And actually, that's true. We were at a retreat this weekend, and tragically, there was a goat had died.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this my oldest had found it. It's one of those situations where they bring goats out to eat the grass in a big field to kind of keep it mown and cut down on wildfires. And he had said, I think there's something wrong with this. I was like, yeah, there's something really wrong with this guy. He's not here anymore. And he was like, well, should we tell somebody? He's like, yes, just tell the manager of the retreat and they'll come take care of it. But it spread like wildfire among the children. And they're like, a dead sheep. Goat. Gotta go see it. Run.
I know, they ran right to it.
Yes, exactly. They couldn't keep themselves away from it. I was like, it's like, no, don't tell anybody. But it was, they just so fascinated by it. And that speaks to why we would use bones or anatomy in general in our schools, because we are fascinated by ourselves. We are egotistical creatures.
Who else was fascinated by bones?
Maria
Montessori.
She was a doctor.
She was. She, there are a lot of stories about her with cadavers, having to do these autopsies, when she was pursuing her medical degree. But she was so fascinated by the human body that she would she would actually, one of her first jobs with the children was not to teach them how to read or any of that. It was to measure them. So her whole
Oh,
job
yeah.
was to go in and, just be in this school-like setting.
Mhm.
And her, she took very detailed notes inside little notebooks about exactly how big their heads were. She did it every month. She would measure every single child, all of their different body parts. She would measure and write down the exact measurements of, weigh them. And so she took super detailed notes about their physical development. And so she was fascinated with physical development. Of course, she would intuitively understand that
That's
children
right.
would also be fascinated. But I'll tell you, David, there's something kind of weird in our Montessori community that comes up now and then.
What is that?
There are some Montessori guides and a train of thought that doesn't believe in teaching about bones or organs until children are in their second plane.
Why is that?
Well, the theory goes that if children cannot see, they cannot see their bones, that it's too abstract. It's like inside.
And by second plane, you mean that a child is usually over the age of 6.
In elementary, yeah. So I disagree with this. There are a lot of other Montessori guides who also disagree with, the not teaching them until later, because our children encounter so many bones out in their world. And because, if you look at your body, you can't see the whiteness or whatever of the bone itself,
the bone would
but
be
you can
inside you,
see that you can feel that there are bones in there. And in my experience, our primary age children don't seem to have any trouble with it at all. Once you give them that little miniature skeleton, they're just riveted by the idea.
Yeah, and I wonder, with the modern world, with so much media and awareness of anatomy, just like generally presented, even in children's entertainment, whether they're already going to have some sense, some awareness. So it'd be nice to make sure that awareness was rooted in actual science.
For sure.
So let's talk about lessons that you can give for with bones.
Okay, so we talked about the bone scrubbing already.
Yeah,
that's a great lesson,
and that's for little ones.
Yes, it's for little ones, but I also recommend it for us as well. It's very satisfying to clean a bone and get in there in the soapy water.
Yeah.
I think if you haven't tried a scrubbing lesson yourself, you will be really surprised at how meditative.
Well, Maria loved scrubbing, right?
She did.
She was actually a fan.
She did. So it's not just teaching them about bones when they do a scrubbing. It's teaching them focus and concentration. And it's also calming their nervous system. It's just very therapeutic, I think, to sit down and clean
the water
something.
And the repetition. And there's a kind of a tactile experience.
Yes.
For sure.
And so children are learning fine motor skill control, especially if you give them a little tiny scrubber, like a toothbrush size scrubber, they're I don't know, they're developing that finger strength.
That's right.
So there's that. There's also, we generally begin with a discussion with our little ones about living things versus non-living things and kind of lead in that way. And that's kind of a complicated discussion because a dead animal that you see in the ground is not alive anymore.
But it was a living
but it
thing.
once was a living thing. And so these discussions that you have out and about in the world really lead you into these Montessori lessons. So it can be really fun to sort things into living things and not non-living things.
Yeah, is a bone a living thing?
And then also something fun to sort that we actually did in our bone unit that I'll share is we actually provided these little cards for classification. And these are all vertebrates. So these things on this page all have backbones. They all have vertebrae. And on the back, if you print them double-sided, we have a little bone on the back so that if you print them bracken-sided, it gives a little control of error. And then we also had these little creatures that were invertebrate.
It's going to be right here.
Is it going to be behind?
Yep.
Yeah. Let me see if I can grab that.
Yeah,
here we go. Yeah. So here's some invertebrates. Don't have bones. A bumblebee, an anemone, oh, what else is here? An octopus, a spider. And we would be marking those with like a little worm for control of error. So if you print them double-sided, they do that. So you could do this yourself. You could take pictures of things that are around you and create this work, things that have bones or don't.
10 things that have bones, 10 things that don't have bones.
You could go to the zoo and make these little cards just with photographs that you took yourself super easily.
Totally.
It'd be so fun. So you don't have to have this material, or it would be a great extension to this material too.
Yeah, I think a really fun one that we did is we talked a little bit about it, but like what are bones versus what is not a bone. So we talked about teeth are not bones, an antler is a bone, and then getting, especially I think with the older children as they start to really get into the ability to research, is a turtle shell a bone? How about a crab's body, the carapace on a crab? Is that a bone?
Right.
And you can get into classifying invertebrates, or things with exoskeletons versus things that have skeletons on the inside.
Right.
And what makes them different and how do we classify them? So it would be just a continuation of that classifying of animals. So we talked about classifying things that have a backbone versus don't have a backbone, right? Vertebrates, invertebrates, things that have an exoskeleton versus those that have a skeleton inside, right? And what that looks like, and can you classify them? And things that sort of are confusing, like is a turtle shell a bone? And the answer is, I think, yes. It's attached to their spine.
It is attached to their spine. So yeah, there are lots and lots of lessons. My favorite thing to do, and why I'm encouraging you so much to get yourself a little miniature 2 or 3 foot skeleton, is because it just makes it so real, and you can play all these little games with the children. Usually, we play the games. I call it a game, but really you're just using the 3-period lesson. And so you're saying, like, this is the patella, point to the patella, and you point to it on the skeleton. Now find your patella. Oh, you're showing our
command card. So isn't this what you were getting at?
This is another activity,
okay.
But yeah, you could do this too. So these are command cards that we made. You can just say them if you want. But you're right, it does go along with the 2nd period. So once your child knows a couple of the names, you could say, like, touch your phalanges to your patella, or touch your patella, to I don't know what else. What could you touch your patella to? Your ribs, maybe. Your child can do that. Might be harder for those of us who are adults.
Yeah, so you might start by doing a 3-part card, and then you might...
No, I would start by giving the 3-period lesson with the actual skeleton.
With the real skeleton.
Yeah.
And then you would move to the 3-part card.
As an extension, yeah.
And then you would have them start playing a game.
You would, the game can go along with the real skeleton with that kind of play. Anyway, there's no real wrong way. You're just moving from concrete to abstract, right? So you're teaching them the names first. The cards just give you extra information and help you to classify, and it can be fun.
Totally. Yeah. And, it's an essential. It's one of those essentials that is free, or it's clearly nearly free. I mean, there's so many great books that you can get from your library, resources online, some of the kind of games that we were talking about playing, or the lessons and activities, such as the classification. They're easy to DIY, or you can, buy a pack that has it all together, going to museums and seeing their collection of bones, or just even being on the hunt for bones. Or like I said, if you eat meat in your house, you're going to have chicken bones. You eat Thanksgiving dinner, you're going to have turkey bones. You're going to have, I remember as a kid, I was always fascinated by the ribeye bone. What is that thing? It looks so funny. And so just through the course of your everyday living, you might be able to come across these things, and then through this process of cleaning
I also have to say, you can also often go to your local butcher shop if you have like an old school butcher shop, or
if you can find one.
If you can find one, if you have like an area that where you can actually talk to a real person who does the butchering or handles that. They also might have some really big and cool bones, or with the flesh attached to it in the background. So
Yeah.
you can, and sometimes they'll give them to you for free. They'll say, like, we're not going to use these parts, so you're welcome to have them, or you could get a bag of them. And those would be cool to bury in your backyard and then inspect.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
as we learned, it doesn't matter if it's gross.
Yep.
It could still be fun.
That's
especially
right.
to the child.
That's right. Just keep with the sanitation, friends.
That's
Wear
right.
the gloves. Make sure if you're burying things that you know where you buried it.
Yeah, so you don't have to spend a fortune. You probably don't have to spend really any money at all in order to incorporate anatomy and the study of bones. If you can buy a little Mr. Thrifty, those are awesome to have. We got a lot of mileage out of it, and over the years with our kids.
Yep.
It's important because for the good of society, we all should have a pretty good understanding of how our bodies work, and it starts with kids, like helping them understand how to stay healthy and how to stay safe. Starts with teaching them about what their body is and so forth. So it's just fun. Anatomy is fun. Bones are really a great way to make that literal.
They really are. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us today. If the Montessori method is calling to you and you want more Montessori, come join us at Child of the Redwoods. We've got 3 awesome programs that are waiting for you. You can also pick up a copy of this bone unit, which is chock full of lessons. There's even a 4-week plan that'll take you through a whole month's worth of bone lessons and projects. So that is available to you all on our website, childoftheredwoods.com.
Yeah, and if you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to us at hello@childoftheredwoods.com, or you can reach us on Instagram, or you can leave a comment here, or just head over to our website and you'll find a comment or a connect form. You also find the podcast version there. It's about a month behind. So if you're liking to listen to this as well, or prefer to listen to it, you can go and subscribe over there. We're going to be back next week.
Yeah, we're going to be back next week. So we will see you at the same time in the same place.
Yes, for sure. Take care.
Take care, everyone.